It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning. The kind of day that makes you want to sit outside, feel the warm sun on your face, and sip something cozy. Jake Miller was doing just that. He was on his front porch holding a big mug of coffee, watching the world go by. Jake was new to Willow Grove, a tidy little neighborhood with neat houses and green lawns. He'd moved here 3 months ago, thinking it would be a quiet, happy place to live. He wanted peace. He wanted calm, but calm. Oh, that was not going to happen, not today, and definitely not with Karen Baxter around. Karen was the boss of the HOA. That's the group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like how your house should look or what you can put in your yard. And let me tell you, Karen took her job way too seriously. She acted like she owned every single house on the street. If your grass grew just a tiny bit too tall, like half an inch, she'd show up with a big frown and stick a fine on your door. A fine is like a ticket that says you owe money for breaking a rule. Forgot to bring your trash can back inside by lunchtime? Boom, you'd get a mean email from Karen telling you how you're a bad neighbor. Everyone in Willow Grove knew her name, and not in a good way. Jake had heard all about Karen. Neighbors whispered about her when they thought no one was listening. Watch out for Karen, they'd say. She's trouble. But Jake, he's a chill guy. He thought, I'll just keep my head down, follow the rules, and she won't bother me. He figured he could stay off her radar, like staying invisible. But guess what? That plan didn't work, not even a little bit. Spoiler alert, Jake was about to learn that Karen notices everything. Hey, you watching this? What do you think Karen's gonna do? Got any guesses? Drop them in the comments below and let me know where you're watching from today. Oh, and if you love stories that twist and turn, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this one's gonna get wild. So there Jake was, sitting on his porch, his coffee steaming in his hand. The street was quiet. Kids were riding bikes a few houses down, their laughter bouncing through the air. A couple of birds chirped in the trees. It felt like the perfect morning. Jake leaned back in his chair, taking a big sip of his coffee. He smiled to himself, thinking maybe this neighborhood isn't so bad. But then out of nowhere he saw her, Karen Baxter, and she wasn't just walking. Oh no. She was storming down the street like a thundercloud ready to burst. Karen had a clipboard in her hand. She held it tight like it was some kind of superhero shield or maybe a weapon. Her eyes were sharp, darting left and right, looking for anything she could complain about. Her lips were pressed into a thin line like she was already mad at the world. Jake watched her coming closer and his stomach did a little flip. Not because he was scared, Jake wasn't the type to scare easy, but because he had a feeling this wasn't going to be fun. Karen stopped right in front of Jake's driveway. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just stood there staring at his car. It was an SUV, nothing fancy, parked neatly in his driveway. But the way Karen was looking at it, you'd think it was a giant monster truck blocking the whole street. Her eyes narrowed. She scribbled something on her clipboard, her pen moving fast like she was writing a secret code. Jake tilted his head, confused. What was her deal? His car wasn't doing anything wrong. It wasn't even parked funny. Jake took another sip of his coffee, trying to stay calm. He told himself maybe she's just checking something, maybe she'll keep walking, but deep down he knew better. Karen wasn't the type to just check anything. When she showed up, trouble followed. And right now she was standing there, glaring at his car like it had called her a bad name. Jake sighed. Here we go, he said under his breath. He didn't know it yet, but Karen was about to start a fight she'd wished she'd never picked. Let's rewind a bit and talk about Jake. He wasn't your average guy. Sure, he looked normal, tall, short brown hair, always wearing a t-shirt and jeans. But Jake had a past. Before moving to Willow Grove, he'd spent years working as a private investigator. That's someone who solves mysteries for a living, like finding out secrets or catching people doing sneaky things. Jake was good at it too. He had a knack for noticing details other people missed. A nervous glance, a weird word choice. Little clues that told big stories. He'd left that life behind. Hopping Willow Grove would be a fresh start. No mysteries, no drama, just a quiet house and maybe a dog someday. but old habits, they don't go away so easy. Back to that morning. Jake watched Karen from his porch, his coffee mug warm in his hands. She was still staring at his car, her clipboard clutched tight. Jake's SUV was clean, parked straight, not blocking anything. So why was Karen acting like it was a crime scene? He leaned forward, squinting a little. Was she looking at the tires, the windows? Nope. It was the side mirror, the mirror. She was glaring at it like it had personally ruined her day. Now Jake's mirror wasn't anything special. It was just a regular car mirror, sticking out the way all car mirrors do. It wasn't bent or broken, it wasn't dangling off, it was just there. But Karen, she was acting like that mirror was the worst thing she'd ever seen. She scribbled more notes, her pen scratching so loud Jake could almost hear it from his porch. Then she looked up right at him. Her eyes locked onto his, and Jake felt a chill. Not because he was scared, but because he knew that look. It was the look of someone who loved causing trouble. Jake set his coffee down on the little table next to his chair. He stood up slowly, brushing his hands on his jeans. He wasn't sure what Karen was up to, but he wasn't going to let her ruin his morning without a word. "Morning, Karen," he called out, keeping his voice friendly. He even gave her a small wave, like maybe he could charm her into calming down. Fat chance. Karen didn't wave back. She didn't even blink. She just pointed at his car, her finger stabbing the air like a sword. "That mirror," she shouted. Her voice was loud enough to make a dog down the street start barking. "It's sticking out too far, it's against the rules." Jake blinked. Rules? What rule? He'd read the HOA handbook when he moved in, mostly because he didn't want any trouble. It was full of boring stuff about paint colors and mailbox sizes, but he was pretty sure there was nothing about car mirrors. He took a step closer, standing at the edge of his porch. "Karen, it's just a mirror," he said, keeping his tone light. "It's not hurting anybody." But Karen wasn't having it. She shook her head so hard her glasses almost slid off her nose. "It's a safety hazard," she snapped. "It's dangerous. Someone could trip or crash into it." Jake raised an eyebrow. Trip, crash. His car was in his driveway, not the middle of the street, and the mirror wasn't even close to the sidewalk. He opened his mouth to say something, but Karen kept going. "I'm reporting you," she said, waving her clipboard like it was proof of her power. "This is unacceptable." Jake leaned against the porch railing, crossing his arms. He wasn't mad, not yet, but he was starting to get annoyed. He'd dealt with people like Karen before, people who loved bossing others around just because they could. Back in his investigator days, he'd met plenty of them. They'd yell and point and make big threats, but usually they were hiding something. Something they didn't want anyone to know. Jake's old instincts kicked in. He looked at Karen, really looked at her. Her face was red, her hands were tight on that clipboard, and her eyes kept darting around like she was checking to see if anyone else was watching. Why was she so worked up over a mirror? It didn't add up. "So what's Karen's deal? Why's she freaking out about a silly mirror? Any ideas? Let's keep going because this story's just getting started." Jake decided to stay cool. He wasn't going to argue with her, not yet anyway. He gave her a small nod like he was agreeing even though he was. "Okay, Karen," he said. "I'll look at the mirror, promise." He even smiled, hoping it would make her back off. But Karen didn't budge. She stood there, feet planted like she was ready for a showdown. "You'd better," she said, her voice sharp, "or you'll hear from the HOA, and trust me, you don't want that." Then she turned and marched away, her clipboard swinging with every step. Jake watched her go, his smile fading. He picked up his coffee mug and took a long sip, thinking. Karen was trouble, no doubt about it, but there was something else, something about the way she acted, like she was trying too hard to seem in charge. Jake's investigator brain was waking up, whether he wanted it to or not. He glanced at his car, at the mirror Karen was so mad about. It looked fine to him, totally normal. So why was she making such a big deal? Was it really about the mirror? Or was something else going on? As Karen disappeared around the corner, Jake sat back down on his porch. The sun was still shining, the kids were still laughing, but the morning didn't feel quite so perfect anymore. He tapped his fingers on his mug, his mind racing. He didn't want drama, he didn't want to fight, but if Karen was going to come after him over something as dumb as a car mirror, he wasn't going to just sit there and take it. Not when his gut was telling him there was more to this story. What do you think happens next? Is Karen just being mean, or is she hiding something? Stick around, because this is about to get super interesting. Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the street where Karen had vanished. He didn't know it yet, but that little moment, Karen and her clipboard, his car mirror, that sunny morning, was the start of something big. Something that would shake up Willow Grove and make everyone see Karen Baxter in a whole new way. For now, though, Jake just sipped his coffee, watching and waiting. Because if there's one thing he'd learned in his old job, it's that secrets don't stay hidden forever. And Karen, she was definitely hiding something. Karen stomped right up to Jake's porch, her face so red it looked like a bright stop sign. She pointed a finger at his SUV, which was parked neatly in his driveway. "Your car mirror is sticking out too far," she shouted, her voice loud and sharp. Jake, still holding his coffee mug, just blinked. What?" he said, tilting his head. He wasn't sure if he'd heard her right. His car mirror, really? "It's a safety hazard," Karen snapped, her eyes flashing like she'd caught him doing something awful. "It's against HOA rules and I'm reporting you." She waved her clipboard for extra drama, like it was proof she was right. Jake took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. He set his coffee down and leaned against the porch railing. "Karen," he said slowly, "it's a standard mirror. It's not even touching the sidewalk. It's fine." But Karen wasn't listening, not one bit. She was already pulling out her phone, her fingers moving fast as she started dialing. "Reckless neighbors," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Jake to hear. Jake watched her, feeling a mix of things. Half of him was annoyed. Why was she making such a big deal about nothing? The other half, honestly, he was a little amused. Karen was acting like his car mirror was the worst crime in the world. He'd met people like her before, bullies who loved bossing everyone around, making rules just to feel important. Karen was exactly that type. She had that smug grin, the kind that said she thought she was smarter than everyone else. But something about that grin bugged Jake. It wasn't just mean, it looked nervous, like she was trying to hide something. Why was she so obsessed with controlling every little thing? Why did she seem so jumpy? "Hey, have you ever met someone like Karen? You know, the type who picks fights over silly stuff. What would you do if you were Jake right now? Drop a comment below and let me know. Oh, and if you're liking this story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Things are about to get interesting." Jake crossed his arms and kept watching Karen. She was packing now, her phone pressed to her ear, talking fast. "Yes, I need someone out here right away," she said into the phone. "There's a dangerous situation in my neighborhood." Dangerous? Jake almost laughed out loud. His car mirror wasn't dangerous. It was just a mirror, sitting there on his SUV, not bothering anybody. But Karen kept going, her voice getting louder. "He's breaking the rule," she said. "It's a hazard and I won't stand for it." Jake shook his head. He wasn't worried about her threats, not really. He dealt with bigger problems than an angry HOA lady. Back when he was a private investigator, he'd faced all kinds of tough situations. People yelling, people lying, people trying to scare him. Karen was loud, sure, but she wasn't scary. Still, Jake's old investigator brain was starting to wake up. He couldn't help it. Something about Karen didn't feel right. She was too mad, too quick to fight. And that nervous look in her eyes, it made him curious. What was her deal? Then, out of the corner of his eye, Jake noticed something strange. Down the street, half hidden behind a big tree, was a police car. It was just sitting there, quiet. No flashing lights, no sirens, no nothing, just parked like it was waiting for something. Jake's eyebrows went up. That was weird. Why were the cops here, and why hadn't Karen noticed them? She was still ranting into her phone, going on about how Jake's mirror was endangering the whole neighborhood. She was so busy yelling, she didn't even glance at the police car. Jake kept his face calm, but inside his mind was racing. His investigator gut was telling him something big was going on, something bigger than a silly fight about a car mirror. He leaned forward a little, pretending to stretch so he could get a better look at the cop car. Yep, it was definitely there. Two officers were inside, just sitting, watching. But they weren't watching Jake's house. They were looking at Karen's house a few doors down. That made Jake's curiosity grow even more. Why were the cops watching her? What do you think's going on? Why are the police here? Got any guesses? Stick with me because this story's getting good. Karen finally hung up her phone, looking smug again. She pointed at Jake one more time. You're in trouble now, she said, her voice dripping with confidence. I called the authorities. They'll deal with you. Jake just shrugged, keeping his cool. Okay, Karen, he said, picking up his coffee mug again. If you say so. He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of his mug. He wasn't going to argue, not when he had a feeling she was about to get a surprise she didn't expect. Karen huffed like she was annoyed that Jake wasn't scared. She turned and started marching back toward her house, her clipboard swinging with every step. Jake watched her go, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't sure what was up, but he knew one thing: Karen was acting way too weird. People didn't get that mad over a car mirror unless something else was going on, and those cops, they weren't here for him. Jake had a clean record, no reason for the police to care about him. But Karen, maybe she wasn't as perfect as she wanted everyone to think. Jake leaned back in his chair, his coffee mug warm in his hands. The street was still sunny, still quiet, except for Karen's yelling a minute ago. The kids down the block were still riding their bikes, laughing like nothing was wrong. But Jake's investigator instincts were buzzing now. He couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was hiding something. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just a grumpy lady who loved power. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story. He glanced at the police car again. It hadn't moved. The officers were still there, still watching. Jake's mind started putting pieces together, even though he didn't have all the clues yet. He thought about Karen's nervous eyes, her shaky hands when she held her clipboard. He thought about how she jumped straight to calling the cops over something so small. Most people would just knock on your door and talk. Not Karen. She went full attack mode. Why? What was she so afraid of? Jake took another sip of his coffee, letting the warm drink calm his thoughts. He wasn't going to do anything yet. He'd learned back in his old job that sometimes you just had to wait, watch, listen. The truth always came out eventually. And right now, his gut was telling him the truth about Karen was closer than she thought, maybe even as close as that police car down the street. So what's Karen up to? Is she just being mean, or is there a secret waiting to spill? Let's keep going, you don't want to miss this. The next hour felt like a storm brewing. Karen wasn't done with Jake, not even close. She stood in his driveway, her phone glued to her ear, and guess what? She called 911. Yes, 911, like Jake's car mirror was some huge emergency. This car is endangering the whole neighborhood. She shouted into the phone, loud enough for Jake to hear every word. He was still on his porch, sipping his coffee, but his jaw dropped a little. Endangering the neighborhood, his SUV was just parked there, minding its own business. Karen kept going, her voice getting wilder. He's threatening me, she said. I don't feel safe. Jake shook his head, almost laughing, threatening her. He'd barely said 10 words to her. All he'd done was tell her the mirror was fine. He wasn't yelling or waving his arms. He was just sitting there, calm as could be. But Karen, she was acting like he was some big, scary, bad guy. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching her. This was getting ridiculous. Have you ever seen someone make a huge deal out of nothing? What do you think Karen's up to? Drop a comment below and let me know. Oh, and if you're loving this drama, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming. It's about to get really good. Now Jake wasn't just any guy. He wasn't the type to panic or get mad. See, before he moved to Willow Grove, Jake had a pretty cool job. He was a private investigator. That's someone who solves mysteries, like finding out who's telling the truth or what's really going on. He was super good at it too. He could spot clues nobody else noticed. Even though he moved here for a quieter life, no more mysteries, no more chasing secrets, his old habits didn't just disappear. And right now, watching Karen act like a drama queen, those habits were waking up fast. While Karen kept yelling into her phone, Jake started paying close attention. He wasn't just annoyed anymore, he was curious. He noticed little things about her, like how her hands were shaking as she held the phone. Not just a little tremble, but a real shake, like she was nervous about something big. And then he saw her eyes. She kept glancing down the street, quick and sneaky, toward that police car parked by the tree, the one Jake had spotted earlier. It was still there, quiet, with two officers inside. Karen hadn't said a word about it, but Jake could tell she knew it was there. Her nervous looks gave her away. What's Karen hiding? Why's she so jumpy? Stay with me, because this is where things start getting juicy. Jake's brain was buzzing now. He'd dealt with people like Karen before, back in his investigator days. People who acted big and tough but were secretly scared of getting caught. Was that what was going on? Was Karen afraid of something? Jake decided it was time to do a little digging. Not big, obvious stuff, just small, quiet moves. He stood up, stretched his arms like he was just relaxing, and strolled down to his mailbox. It was right by the street, close enough to get a better look at that police car without seeming nosy. As he walked, he kept his eyes casual, like he was just checking for letters. But really, he was watching the cop car. Yep, it was still there. The two officers inside weren't moving. They weren't eating donuts or chatting. They were just sitting, staring straight ahead. And here's the thing, they weren't looking at Jake's house. They were looking at Karen's house a few doors down. Jake's heart beat a little faster. That was interesting. Really interesting. Jake grabbed his mail, just a couple of bills, and headed back to his porch. He didn't want Karen to think he was up to anything. She was still in his driveway, packing back and forth, muttering to herself now that her phone call was done. Jake sat down again, his coffee mug cold but still in his hand. He pulled out his phone, acting like he was just scrolling through stuff, but what he was really doing, sending a text. See, Jake still had friends from his old job, including a buddy who worked at the police station. He typed a quick message. Hey, what's up with the cops on my street? Anything I should know? He hit send and waited, keeping one eye on Karen. She was writing something on her clipboard now, her pen moving fast. Probably another complaint about his mirror. Jake shook his head. She was so focused on him, she didn't even notice the police car down the street. Or maybe she was pretending not to notice. Either way, Jake's phone buzzed with a reply. He glanced at it and his eyebrows shot up. His friend's message was short but huge. Ask your HOA lady. She's in deep. Jake read it twice just to be sure. Karen, in deep with what? His mind started racing. Was she in trouble with the cops? Was that why they were watching her house? Oh, this was getting good, really good. Jake leaned back, a small smile tugging at his lips. He wasn't the type to gloat, but he had a feeling Karen's big attack on him was about to backfire. Can you believe it? Karen's got secrets. What do you think she's done? Let's keep going. You're not gonna want to miss this. Jake put his phone away and looked at Karen again. She was still in his driveway, but she wasn't yelling anymore. She looked tired, like all her shouting had worn her out, but her hands were still shaky and her eyes kept flicking toward that police car. Jake's smile faded. He wasn't laughing now. He was thinking like an investigator. Karen wasn't just being mean. She was scared of something big enough to bring cops to her street. And whatever it was, Jake was pretty sure it had nothing to do with his car mirror. He took a deep breath and sipped his cold coffee. He didn't know the whole story yet, but he knew one thing. Karen was in trouble. Maybe she'd broken a law. Maybe she'd done something sneaky with the HOA. Whatever it was, those cops weren't here for him. They were here for her. And Karen, she was acting like she could scare Jake into backing down, like she could control everything. But Jake wasn't scared. He was curious. And when Jake got curious, he didn't stop until he found answers. Karen finally looked up from her clipboard. She glared at Jake like she was daring him to say something. "You'll hear from the HOA," she called out, her voice sharp but not as loud as before. Jake just nodded, keeping his face blank. "Sure thing, Karen," he said, calm as ever. He wasn't going to fight her, not yet. He didn't need to. If his friend's text was right, Karen had bigger problems than a car mirror. Way bigger. She huffed and turned away, marching back toward her house. Jake watched her go, his mind still working. He thought about her shaky hands, her nervous glances, that police car sitting so quiet. He thought about his friend's message, "She's in deep." Jake didn't know what it meant yet, but he was going to find out. Not because he wanted trouble, he didn't. He'd moved here to get away from trouble. But if Karen was going to drag him into her mess, he wasn't going to just sit there. He was going to pay attention. And maybe, just maybe, he'd figure out what was really going on in Willow Grove. Karen was back in Jake's driveway, and boy, was she acting like she'd won a prize. She waved her phone in the air like it was a flag, her face all smug and proud. "The police are coming for you," she shouted, pointing at Jake with a grin that said she thought she was the boss. Jake was leaning against his front door, his arms crossed, trying so hard not to laugh. Her words were so big and bold, but Jake knew something she didn't. He tilted his head and gave her a calm look. "Are they, Karen?" he said, his voice super steady. "Or are they already here for someone else?" Karen's face changed in a snap. It was like someone hit a pause button on her. Her smug grin froze and her eyes got wide. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice all shaky now. She looked confused, maybe even a little scared. Jake didn't say another word. He didn't have to. Because right at that moment, something happened that made Karen's jaw drop. The police car, the one Jake had seen parked down the street, started moving. It rolled slowly, its tires crunching on the road. But here's the thing, it didn't stop at Jake's house. Nope, it pulled right up to Karen's house just a few doors down. Two officers stepped out, both looking super serious. Their faces weren't smiley or friendly. They meant business. One of them, a tall guy with a deep voice, called out, "Karen Baxter, we need to talk." "Whoa, did you see that coming?" "I bet Karen did. What's gonna happen now? Stick around, this is getting so good." Karen's clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the ground with a loud thunk. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She just stood there, staring at the officers, her face turning pale. Jake stayed where he was, still leaning against his door, watching it all like it was a movie. He wasn't grinning or cheering, he was too cool for that, but inside he was pretty happy. Because the truth was coming out, and it was a doozy. See, Karen wasn't just a mean HOA lady who loved bossing people around. Oh no, she'd been doing something way worse. The cops had figured it out, and now they were here to tell everyone. Turns out, Karen had been stealing money from the HOA. Not just a little bit, like a few bucks, but thousands of dollars. That money was supposed to be for fun stuff, like fixing the playground or putting up holiday lights for the neighborhood. But Karen, she'd been sneaking it into her own bank account like a secret piggy bank for years. Jake's neighbors had started to suspect her a while back. They'd noticed things didn't add up, like how the community pool was always under repair, but no one ever saw workers fixing it, or how the HOA fees kept going up but nothing new got built. Someone nobody knew who had finally had enough and called the police. They told the cops to check Karen's bank stuff, and guess what? The cops found everything. Proof that Karen was a thief. And can you believe it? Karen thought she was so smart, but now she's caught. What do you think she'll do? Keep watching, you're gonna love this. The tall officer started talking, his voice clear and loud so everyone could hear. "Ms. Baxter," he said, "we have bank records showing you took HOA funds. We've got fake invoices you made to cover it up. It's all right here." He held up a folder, thick with papers. Karen's eyes got even wider, like she couldn't believe what was happening. She shook her head fast. "This is a mistake," she squeaked, her voice all high and panicky. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the cops weren't buying it. The other officer, a woman with a stern face, stepped closer. "We've been watching you for weeks," she said. "We know exactly what you did." She pulled out a pair of handcuffs, and the crowd, because neighbors were starting to gather now, let out a big gasp. Karen's face went from pale to ghostly white. She looked around like she was hoping someone would jump in and save her. But nobody did, not one person. Jake stayed quiet, just watching. He didn't need to say anything. The truth was doing all the talking. Neighbors were coming out of their houses now, standing on their lawns, whispering to each other. "I knew it," one lady muttered, clutching her coffee mug. "She fined me for my flowers last month," a guy across the street nodded. "She told me my mailbox was the wrong color. Now I know where my money went." The whispers got louder, and Karen looked smaller with every word. The tall officer kept going, laying it all out. "You took over $10,000, he said. "Money that belonged to this neighborhood. You used it for yourself, new clothes, fancy dinners, even a trip to Hawaii." Karen shook her head again, but her voice was gone now. She just kept mouthing, "No, no, no," like that would make it all go away. The woman officer stepped forward and started reading Karen her rights. "You know that thing cops say on TV? You have the right to remain silent." Karen looked like she might faint. "Wow, right? Karen's whole world is falling apart. Have you ever seen someone get caught like this? Let me know in the comments. And if you're hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the end of this story." By now, the crowd was big. Kids on bikes had stopped to stare. Old Mr. Jenkins from next door was leaning on his cane, shaking his head. Even the mailman slowed down to watch. Karen's reign of terror, the way she bossed everyone around, fined them for tiny things, sent mean emails, was over. Done, finished. Nobody was scared of her anymore. They were just mad. Mad that she'd taken their money. Mad that she'd acted like she was better than them. And maybe a little happy that she was finally getting what she deserved. Karen tried one last time to talk her way out. "You've got it all wrong," she said, her voice cracking like a broken toy. "I was just keeping the money safe," but the officers didn't even blink. The woman cop snapped the handcuffs on Karen's wrists, click, click, and Karen let out a tiny squeak. The crowd got quiet for a second, like they couldn't believe it was real. Then the whispers started again, louder than before. Jake watched it all, his arms still crossed. He wasn't surprised, not really. He'd known something was up with Karen. His old investigator instincts had told him she was hiding something. And that text from his friend, "She's in deep." It all made sense now. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was a crook. And now everyone knew it. The officers started leading Karen toward the police car. Her head was down, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look like the big, scary HOA boss anymore. She looked small, scared, like someone who'd been caught red-handed and had no way out. The tall officer opened the car door and Karen slid inside, not looking at anyone. The crowd watched, some pointing, some shaking their heads. Jake stayed where he was, letting it all sink in. Karen's big plan to get him in trouble, it had blown up in her face. Big time. Karen's face was something else as the police officers walked her to their car. No more clipboard swinging in her hand. No more smug grin like she ruled the world. Just wide eyes and pure panic. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Jake stood on his porch, sipping his cold coffee, watching it all. He didn't cheer or clap, he was too chill for that, but inside he felt good. The neighbors, who were usually too scared to even talk to Karen, were buzzing now. They weren't afraid anymore. "Finally," one guy muttered, standing on his lawn. "She fined me because my dog barked once," another lady nodded. "She told me my fence was too tall. Good riddance." Jake leaned against his porch railing, letting the moment sink in. Karen had spent so long bossing everyone around, acting like she was the queen of Willow Grove. But now, her crown was gone. The police car door shut with a thud and Karen was out of sight. The crowd of neighbors kept whispering, some even laughing a little. For the first time in forever, the street felt free. How awesome was that? Have you ever seen a bully get what they deserve? Drop a comment below and tell me. Oh, and if you're loving this